I'm recording this, so you can see it afterwards. I can send you the link whenever you want, and you can see this whole thing again. Okay.
Could you send me the link for last month? Because if you remember, I wasn't able to come last month.
Who is that?
Hey, Richard.
Ah, can you remind me, please, Richard?
I'll send you a note. Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else? I'll do that. Okay. Lucas is muted. Tom is muted. Okay. So, just to let those who've not been here before, just to give you an idea of how we sort of do things here, and why it might be a bit different. Instead of we sort of do philosophy here, we discuss things and we move along, or in a way that it's not just, hang on, somebody else there, Najib. It's not just me talking and then you asking questions, a Q&A. It's more discussion that I will start it. Actually, I can talk all the time, but I won't. And the point is that when I talk, you can interrupt me whenever you want. Basically, not because for any, it has to be a good reason. Not like, I don't understand what you're talking about. That's not a good reason. A lot of you won't understand what I'm talking about. No, but if you want to make a comment or anything, that's fine. And I will tell you, like, could you hang on with that because I'm going to come to it, or I'm going to say, well, I can't talk about that now, or we can go into discussion. What often happens, though, is we go into a tremendous discussion and I don't say half the things I want to say. So the more people there are, the more difficult it is. But anybody who wants to speak can. Najib? Najib? Where is he? Najib? Najib, I can't see you or hear you. Oh, hi, Najib. Welcome. I can see you. Can you move your... Okay, Najib, fine. So,
hello. Hello.
Hi,
am I audible?
Yes. Is that
hey, Ron?
Yes.
I'm still working through my the camera and the microphone situation. I just download Zoom, but it's good to be with you.
Yes, very, very, very good to have you. So, I'm just going to ask you to. Okay, so, what do I mean when I talk about philosophy? By philosophy, I mean reflecting and thinking about the human condition, that's important, in a world we try to understand. So that's what we're going to do together. But those words are important. So the reflecting we do on the first Sunday of the month discussion is with people from a number of countries, and that makes it very, very interesting. Rather than when before this, all this business with Corona, when I used to go and speak at various places, I met people more or less from the area who knew each other, etc., etc. But here we're from a lot of countries, and it makes it extremely interesting because we're getting views and perspectives from sources we would not normally come across. Okay, so Zoom has its advantage of our being close and far away. Actually, we have nothing to lose by opening up and talking. We're just here, we're far, but we're actually close. So a thread, a link through all our meetings is doubt. I would venture that everyone who comes here has doubts, otherwise they wouldn't come. Now it's easy to have doubts about things we don't understand, right? We've got doubts and we've got questions, but sometimes there are things that are so clear and everybody knows what they are, but we don't really know what they are, and we don't really care because everybody says it. like it is what it is. I mean, everybody says this, and I don't really know what it means. Hang on, don't go away, we've got people. We got 2 people coming in. So, Najib, I saw you for a second. Wendy, I'd like to see you. Martin's iPad, I'd like to see your iPad. Okay, so oh, hi there, Wendy.
Hi,
Thanks for coming. Hi. Martin, I need to see you too. And everything will be great. So, as I said, when there are things like it is what it is, it seems such a simple thing. And I thought, okay, it'd be interesting to go into that and see what that's all about. Look, questions don't come from nowhere. I think questions are thoughts with a question mark. They arise from perceptions that add to memory and resurface and are changed. So the metamorphosis of thought to doubt comes about through the addition of this question mark. 1 second, one more person's coming in. We're going to have a full house soon. Okay, so look at the difference between it is what it is and it is what it is. There's a hell of a difference there. Actually, after last month's meeting, where we talked about the self, and that was quite, we got quite deep. And hi there, Martin.
Hi.
And I thought, okay, we'll do something a bit simpler today. But I thought today's meeting would be like a walk in the park. But unfortunately, and that was the good news. The bad news is it's not a walk in the park. And the more I thought about it, the more I got, well, you'll soon see. So, anyway, doubt is what moves us forward. Doubt, not certainty. Decisions require uncertainty, not certainty. Okay, it's dissatisfaction with the status quo, and I can't think of more of a status quo than it is what it is. So doubt as the underlying start to something that we are looking at, that we're examining. So lots of philosophers have spoken about doubt, of course. Danish Kierkegaard, he spoke about doubt having an integral role, as it did for Descartes, but in a very different way. Okay, for Descartes, doubt is a preparation, a point of departure for the methodological construction of a rational system. Okay, his way out, I mean, he got to, I think therefore, his way out was God. With God, there is no doubt with God. For Kierkegaard, he had a very slightly, well, he had actually quite a big difference, because for him, doubt moves a subject into existence. So where Descartes finds doubt and then dispels it, so that he has a refuge from the no doubt of I think, therefore I am, Kierkegaard takes doubt as a starting point for existence. And Kierkegaard looked at objectivity and tried to get doubt from objectivity. My doubt is much worse. My doubt is a doubt of doubt. My doubt shakes even that foundation. Or rather, I don't start with objectivity. And those who've read my books and have been with me know that for me, objectivity is a no-no. And everything I do is to fight against the very raison d'etre of objectivity. So my circular way of looking at the world it is to hold on to approximation. For what is approximation? It's doubt in exactness. The exactness of things, that is doubt. And this is where there's a difference between two different strands of philosophy. And now we're coming to the actual topic itself. There is analytic and continental philosophy. And when we get to it is what it is, we're in analytic philosophy. And you will see what I think of it in about 2 minutes. The former, analytic philosophy, does not allow for doubt. It is a system, and I'm putting it very, very crudely, that that reduces philosophy to mathematics, to logic, to form, and it doesn't allow the things that we've been talking about. It doesn't allow for feelings or talking about time or the self or free will or history even. It is just to give you a background for those who don't know, analytic tradition lies in the mid to late 19th to early 20th century philosophers like Frege, Russell, Moore, Wittgenstein, and the philosophers that were linked to the Vienna Circle. Okay, Carnap, Ayer, Quine, etc. Opposing these were eventually called the continental philosophers from Kant, Heidegger, Sartre, and so on. They were very, very different. So in the mathematical solution of logic, where does philosophy come in? Where do we come in? We humans. And I see us as inverse evangelists. Our aim is to sow doubt, not certainty. That's my aim in life, to sow doubt. When you come away from here, you'll be more confused than when you came in. That's my aim in life. Okay, so it is what it is an example of analytic philosophy and how it discusses it. So is what it is a surrender to existence? It is what it is, or a revolt against what there is? Is it true or not? Now, analytic philosophy, as I mentioned, does not deal with doubt. It's a clarity of logic and linguistic form. It's all necessary truth, which is a logical truth. It's to do with how a sentence is set out. There are no non-logical and non-analytic necessary truth. Analytic truth refers to a sentence which is true solely in virtue of its meaning. It is what it is, which means nothing as far as I'm concerned. All right. So as I said, it does not deal with problems that we have been dealing with, which I think are important, where humans come in. It does not deal with the self. It's not interested. As far analytic philosophy is concerned, those are not problems. There are no philosophical problems, because all problems can be worked out within the sentence, within logic, within the language. Okay, so let's have the sentence. It is raining now, right? It's an assertion. We call it an assertion. So it is either true or false. It's raining now. All right, but a form itself doesn't say anything. I can say this is a plongdong. Okay, and it's true. If I call it a plongdong, it's a plongdong. It means nothing. The form is correct, and it's true. I mean, that's what I'm calling it, which is fine, but it means absolutely nothing. So it is what it is a tautology. A tautology means it's always true. It is what it is always true. But that's not interesting. Something that's always true, I don't find interesting at all. There's no doubt. There's nothing further you can say about it. I call it comfort language. And so here not there's anything wrong with being comfortable, of course.
Sorry to interrupt. There is an extra section to tautology. It means also that you are not adding more information. You are not saying anything else. When you say it is what it is, or what is it?
Correct.
You just don't know what it is. That is part of the tautology. There's no information in the sentence. You're saying actually nothing.
Absolutely correct. But it is true in its form. But it adds nothing. Doesn't tell us anything. That's absolutely correct. Thank you.
There's also the fact that it's used by power, talking to doubt, if you like, where it tends to try and close the argument down. There's always that connotation. It's like people saying, get real, or look at the real world. It is what it is, means power is here, you have to do it, don't argue about it. So therefore, there are extra connotations within the language. And can I query something that Ron said earlier about analytical philosophy? Some of the later logics are actually fuzzy logics, do allow doubt in there, but it tends to be based on probability then. So you have different probabilities, but it is more complicated, complex than old-fashioned classical logic, if you like. It goes from, it goes into predicate logic, and then it goes beyond predicate logic. It gets very close to maths.
They lie down.
There's one very important distinction that I think we need to be clear on, which is the difference between analytic philosophy and analytic propositions. So the idea in analytic philosophy is that there are two kinds of statements that you could make. An analytic statement is one that is true because it's a tautology. A synthetic statement is one that is true on the basis of evidence, right? It's not necessarily true. So analytic philosophy considers both of those things. So, you know, if you're asking what is the correct word for this in the English language, that is a synthetic question that you're asking, not an analytic one. If I'm free to choose my own definition, then that might be analytic.
Exactly. I mean, this is Najir. I feel it all boils down to definitions. So it is what it is in relation to what? I mean, the only point of the scientific method is to ensure that you don't falsely believe that something is true that is not, or that something is not true that is. So I feel like it becomes a game of definitions in relation to, you know, whatever the topic is at a particular point in time. And it's like you're playing in muddy waters. You know, you can keep moving the goalpost, you know, over and over and over in relation to whatever definitions you come up with at a particular point in time. So it is what it is in relation to what.
Okay, I'm gonna mention that. That's coming a bit later, and I don't particularly want to go into these details about analytic and synthetic, etc., because that would take us away from what I want to say about this particular tautology. So let's move on from there. I'm going to come to what you mentioned soon. Okay. So I'm going to give you some examples of this tautology, is what I call comfort language. I am what I am. That's another one. That's as you correctly said, Richard. It's you know, you just stop the argument. Sometimes I am what I am. Leave me alone. I am what I am. That's another one. I like what I like. I mean, what the hell does that mean? I like what I like. Yesterday was yesterday. Very, very wise. Yesterday was yesterday, but you're right, Richard, that these are all things that sort of stop you. There's no way to go on from that because you say, okay, so get off. I'm not interested. Yesterday was yesterday. Today's another day, and all that stuff. These are just cliches and mean very, very little. But a tree is a tree, and Jack is Jack, which we're going to come to in a minute. It is what it is at once tautological, which is true by definition, and empirical. It's verified by observation. One of you mentioned that. It is what it is because, I mean, we can see it. It is what it is. But it still means very little, even though it's very, very close to the truth. If you have something that's true by definition and empirical, verified by observation, that is very, very true, except and that's as far as you can go. It doesn't add anything to it, even though you can see it and observe it. Now, why did I go to this crazy subject, you may ask? And nobody's asked me yet, but you're thinking it.
But one question here, one observation, Ronald. I mean, it is what it is. It's true. It's a tautology, but in relation to what? So if you, for example, consider this statement from the point of view of timeless physics, where it talks about everything being an instance, and this element of psychic continuity being some sort of an illusion that the brain puts together to kind of make sense of the language, the linguistic model that we've inherited from our ancestors, then the whole premise starts to crumble. So that's why I still stand behind my assertion, of correlation. So it is what it is in relation to what, because without that definition, it can be anything, right? So it is what it is, as if it's not. Depending on how you define the is.
Well.
I'm coming to that. I'm actually going to come to that a bit later, because that's on my list. That you're absolutely right. That it means absolutely nothing if it's not in relation to something, and actually nothing means anything unless it's related to something else. By the way,
preconceived notion. Yes. Okay.
So
I wonder if I could ask a quick question as well. Is the truth is the word the truth? Is that a tautology?
About 3 months ago, we talked about truth, and I came to the unfortunate position that there is no such thing. But so,
I feel like,
but you don't want to start me on that again, do you?
Well, you have to define.
I feel like everything is rationalized from the conflicting wells of confirmation bias. And if looked at from that point of view, then everything becomes tautologically true, because everybody is trying to defend their, his or her own position. And, those positions, they, use linguistic models or logical foundations that are pertinent to a particular worldview. And these worldviews, the epicenter becomes safeguarding that worldview with whatever logical means that you have at your disposal at a particular given point in time. So everything becomes pathologically true if the premise is, the confirmation bias, the wells of confirmation bias.
If everything is true, then nothing is true. That was met with silence, which it was supposed to be, because you can't.
Everything pertinent to a certain worldview is true.
Everything can't be true because truth must be only one and absolute. That's the reason. There is no such a thing as double truth or as something that's true for you and true for me. Because truth is
right.
one thing.
So now that the discussion moves towards objective truth versus subjective truth. Subjective truth is the point where everybody's point of view, stemming from whatever worldview they're operating from, they hold that as sacrosanct truth.
Yeah, you can say that. You can say that, but you still have to answer the question whether or not murder is is true across all time and space. We can talk about things.
That's
I mean, just because
that's
it's just because something is sanctioned in another country, for example, clitorectomies, doesn't mean that it's good or it's true. I mean, it's not a
yeah.
it's not a matter of just worldview. You wouldn't be able to answer that question if you didn't think there was an objective truth.
Can I interrupt?
Yeah, I want to ask you a question.
Hang on. You're going into truth, and we spent 3 hours on truth about 2 months ago. Now, I am very, very happy to speak about truth because as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't exist, and I will prove it, but not today. If anybody wants to have a session on truth, please write to me. I'd be delighted to talk to you about truth and that it doesn't exist. And objective truth definitely doesn't
we
exist.
Talk about definitions real quick though. Let me address a counterexample to what you said about definitions. I think that there is a purpose and a meaning to definitions, because otherwise you could define things as being something that's contradictory to what you define it as. So
That's from the point of view of science, though.
If I defined up as meaning down, or if I defined down as meaning up, it doesn't make any sense. In other words, there's an underlying logic to language that means that not everything isn't just how I define it. I can't define non-A as A. I can't define a definition as being not a definition. That would be nonsensical. So yes, there are definitional statements, but there's a structure to reality that precludes contradiction, and you can't simply define
exactly
things opposite.
Yeah, and that structure is called scientific coherence.
Yeah.
I mean, scientific coherence or semantic coherence is logical consistency without any kind of contradiction.
Yeah,
You're saying that there's an objective truth, but is that your absolute position?
Objective truth is scientific coherence, devoid of any subjective impositions. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're saying
I mean, absolutely.
Truth is subjective,
this statement for sorry, James.
The objective position.
Can't define true as being false.
Can I introduce a concept in some of the discussion of what we're talking about, which is that of networking? Because many of the definitions that we're talking about are really saying, how big is my network of definition? If I choose a network of size 1, me, I can do that. I can create a self-consistent structure within that network, but I have almost no impact on the future outside of myself. If in contrast, I create a network which is global, in which the word I use has a meaning literally to every person on earth, then the influence that I'm able to have is enormously greater. Many of the things we're talking about, I think, are actually, at least in my own terminology, how much can we impact the future? If I say it is what it is, I'm essentially abdicating any responsibility for what the future is. I'm saying I don't care. It is what it is. It's predestined for any effect. And
I feel like power
approach. But our leverage in the future is an underlying aspect of this, and how we network is part of that.
Isn't that power dynamics, though?
Can we
why do you want to do that?
Can we
just
power
dynamics?
Hang on, folks.
Mutually exclusive.
Hang on.
Oh.
Hang on. Okay. Hang on. Hang on. Some of this I'm going to do. When I say do, I mean talk about. Some of it I'm not going to talk about because we're going way off. And that's not what I wanted to talk about today. Not that there's anything wrong with talking about this, except we'll be here all night. But since the clocks have just changed, and I think that you're gaining another hour. Is that right? In that case, you have all night, and it's fine because you'll have another hour, which is great with me. But at the moment, I've got to get through a bit of stuff. Otherwise, we're going into an incredible direction, which is wonderful, but not tonight, or at least not for the next 3 or 4 hours. All right. But the questions are wonderful, and it shows that everybody is awake. But I can't go through every single part of it is what it is, and I warned you that it's very, very big, much bigger than it is what it is. So, but it's fine. So if we can just sort of keep away from all that technical stuff, because I want to get onto humans rather than an analytic philosophy per se, because that's what I wanted to show. What is the problem, and what it is the most amazing topic. So if it's okay with you, we can carry on like this, but you carry on asking. All right, carry on asking. I will stop you when I can, if I can. It's not always easy because you get very excited. It's wonderful. So this is the most exciting Zoom session on the whole of the Zoom world. This is where it happens. This is when people get really excited. So
Can we raise our hand though, so that throughout or even at the end we have a chance?
I definitely would like. Yes, please do. I will.
That won't work for Jay because it's just a Jay and we can't see his hand.
Yeah, I don't like. I can't see Julian. Julian, I can't see you.
Sorry, my webcam doesn't function, unfortunately. Okay. Otherwise, I'd be happy to join in.
Ronald, this is Najib here. I have a question. I mean, since we're gonna be discussing humans, should we discuss pragmatism versus mysticism? I mean, it seems like those two vocational elements are what underpins all human conduct. Pragmatism versus mysticism, or rational mysticism versus rational pragmatism.
We might be coming to that.
Okay.
If we don't, then you can come back to it, okay?
Okay.
At the moment, even though it doesn't look like it, I have a plan. All right.
Okay.
Okay. The reason I started on this topic, by the way, was because I was having a discussion with a friend of mine who's a philosopher, and it was going backwards and forwards and also email. And at one point we were talking about mathematics and that stuff, and he said to me, "That's a tautology and not worth wasting your breath on," right? And that got me really annoyed, but really annoyed. So what he meant was it's trivial, it's redundant, it's dogmatic, and it's useless. That's what was meant by that. You don't want to talk about its tautology. It's thrown at us again and again and again. That's a tautology, and it's one of the things that I talked about, having doubt upon something that's just thrown at you, that you can't talk about it anymore, which is what Richard mentioned very, very wisely. So so it's a tautology is a statement that is true by necessity or by virtue of its logical form. And so is it explained and therefore no need to bother, right? Or is it non-explained and therefore is unexplainable? Okay, the best that can be said by that view of it is what it is that it gives one a peace of mind. It is what it is. As one of you said to me before this, that it is what it is used very nicely by optimists and pessimists. It's something that everybody can use because it means exactly what you want it to mean, which is absolutely nothing. Except for the person who uses it, means everything. But it stops us in our tracks. But basically, when you say it, it leaves you with no doubt, and you can sit back with a drink and a cigar and say, "Iswiz, it is what it is. Iswiz," and everything's okay. Okay, but is that not the function of religion, to take away doubt? God is God. That's something nice. God is God. And that's the end of the discussion, right? Cults are very good at that. There's, you must probably read it. There's this cult called Nexivum, NXIVM. There's a program, a documentary on Netflix, I think it is. It's called the Vow. Don't know if anybody's seen it or is seeing it. It's pretty horrific. They take away cults take away doubt, and this particular one takes away doubt by putting people through pain, tremendous pain, and so basically it is when people come there, they say you only think it is. These are my words. You only think it is what it is. It isn't what it is until you have proven it, until you've gone through some horrible things. There's branding. There's also terrible stuff that's going on. And then it really is what it is. It is what we say it is. It is what it is no longer an innocent expression. It is what it is when I say that's what it is. But by the way, just out of interest, just one more sentence on this before I forget it, that the leader, Keith Renier, was just sentenced a couple of days ago to 120 years in prison. 120 years. It was horrific sect. If you get a chance to see it, it's called The Vow. It's really horrible. Sorry, yes, somebody wanted to say something?
This is Najib. I mean, it's definitely true that disorientation, aids to a heightened sense of suggestibility. But what I will try to propose here is that one time I was reading in evolutionary biology that the true meaning of the word understanding something is when you have a heightened sense of familiarity towards a certain object. So how does that play into what you're saying regarding doubt and certainty? Could doubt be simply put what's unfamiliar and certainty is the familiar? So instead of having, cults and people, hijacking the terms and convincing people what they should or should not believe, could it just be simply pointing towards a sense of familiarity or not in relation to doubt and certainty?
Can you put me up next, by the way?
Yes, I can see that. What was your question, Najib, again?
So you were talking about doubt and certainty.
Yeah.
As belonging to certain kinds of groups, like cults, who using disorientation, they get people in positions where they're highly suggestible and they can control them from there. But I would argue that doubt and certainty is simply a form of familiarity and unfamiliarity, which are the true cornerstones of the word understanding. So could doubt and certainty be basically clarified as forms of familiarity versus unfamiliarity, understanding versus not understanding something, and therefore the seeds of doubt to kind of flourish from that point of view?
Yeah, okay, that's I think that's fair. It's another way of looking at it. But we don't question certainty, do we?
It's highly familiar. Why should we?
Exactly.
Until you bump shoulders with something that contradicts your worldview, completely unhinging it, and it becomes unfamiliar. And from there, you use doubt to kind of lead your way into the light, into a heightened sense of familiarity, comfort, and understanding. So I think it's like this back and forth, yin yang dichotomy between the familiar and the unfamiliar. That's paved the way for civilization to progress and for us to get to the point where we at right now. And I go back to the two words that I used earlier, which is basically pragmatism versus mysticism. One helping lead humanity towards the light, while the other one, kept humanity in the dark, lingering in purgatory, so to speak.
Okay, Frank,
yeah.
Yes.
I just wanted to say, when we're talking about religion, I would say that religion, especially among the Christianity, is filled with doubt and not with security. I mean, everybody, especially in the Protestants believe that we will never know if we're saved or we're not saved. And therefore, they constantly live in doubt. And that means that as most of the Western civilization is really connected to Christianity, I mean, Christianity is integrative part of Western civilization, then we could say that doubt leads to anxiety, and the whole human condition is really based on anxiety and not security.
What about the Reformation? I mean, you mentioned the
Reformation led to the Protestant
right.
movement, and the Protestant
Which
movement
basically,
also they don't know if they're saved. They're hoping they're saved by doing great and successful things, but there's always
but they basically take the power away from the church. What they did is they took the power away from the church because it was charging people money for indulgences. So basically, Martin Luther, he put a few placards on the church's door, and he said, you know what, just leave it to the individual. Leave it to the individual. Leave it to the subjective individual to make up his or her own mind as to what constitutes the truth, instead of having the collective mob trying to hijack the truth from the seat of the individual. So I think the Protestant movement, the Reformation, the peaceful Reformation, to kind of bring about a new status quo that safeguards everybody's sovereignty, I think is the way towards true enlightenment.
Oh, Ron,
I think the Protestant movement is completely inundated with doubt and anxiety. They are all working for one purpose only, in order to save their souls, and nobody knows if they're among the elect to have their souls. Remember that Luther said faith is through justification, and justification means that you have to be successful in life in order to.
Of course, and that's what companies do all the time. If you're working in a company, you're a scientist. I'm a scientist. We're in competition. So I'm going to try to come up with as many rationalizations or justifications to promulgate my core messaging against yours. And we're on the same team. We're supposed to be on the same team. We're scientists.
And
so this logic,
the song,
I think, is inherent.
Yeah. And hence the song, you sell your soul to the company's store.
Yeah.
Correct. JP.
If doubt equals anxiety, then the relief from that anxiety is a certainty in a belief, right? And that's part of that.
Yes, existential
what religion is all about is providing you with that the relief of uncertainty in that belief of that religion.
But if you're a Catholic, you're constantly worrying about whether you're doing the right thing and doing good works in order to achieve salvation.
The same goes for a mathematician.
And if you're a Protestant, you're worried whether you're going to be among the elect. It's all anxiety. The whole of the system is anxiety, and that's what the church is based on.
Exactly right.
Even the same goes with science. You know, the scientist is trying to find a solution to his or her algorithm. Anxiety, it's an anxiety gambit. Of course, existence is nothing but an anxiety gambit, for sure. And the same is applied to scientists, as well as religious rationalists.
We're moving on. JP's been waiting very patiently for a long time, and Morris and Wendy, in that order. Is that all right? JP, you've been waiting very patiently, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it too. I just for the sake of knowing like what who's speaking and what's going on, I'm just gonna raise my hand. I don't know if that's what you want to use as a system, but makes sense to me. But
you are
just a suggestion.
You're extremely polite, and I'm going to invite you back again. You're the only one who uses the hand.
Thank you.
I can't see his hand because I don't see a J.
You don't. Well, yeah, Richard.
I didn't even know that was part of the protocol.
Richard,
does that mean I'm impolite?
Richard, you have not reached the standard of JP yet. JP is the most polite person here. He's using the hand. JP, go for it.
All right, okay. So I wanted to start off with just.
You're going to get extra time, JP.
So the statement that everything is uncertain. Is that statement for certain or uncertain? In other words, this extreme doubt seems to me to be, to say that everything is uncertain, kind of, well, except for that statement. So why, if everything is uncertain, why should that statement be certain?
It's relative. It's relative to which worldview you're operating from.
Why the extreme skepticism when the basis of that statement refutes itself?
What skepticism are you referring to?
Well, if you say everything is uncertain, there's nothing that can be known with absolute certainty. Everything is approximate, so to speak. That's the best that we can.
When you say everything is uncertain, it's like you're saying everything is unfamiliar.
No, I think there's a difference between familiarity and certainty.
Is there anything that you can tell us that's certain?
Well, what Descartes' conclusion was that he doubted everything except the.
Everything is an idea. That's certain. Everything is an idea.
You reckon that's certain, do you?
Yes, it's 100% logically consistent and coherent.
That's exactly the problem that I was talking about at the beginning about logically consistent. It's not my way of thinking. It doesn't do anything to say that it's logically consistent.
Right. Because logical consistency is power dynamics.
I dismissed it half an hour ago.
Can I introduce something which is very human into this? The human part that I want to introduce is my own doubt. I was looking for something that I doubt in my life. My major doubt is that I will die, because the only certainty is death, and the doubt enables me to go on from day to day, living my life. Otherwise, well, I would probably succumb to feelings of.
What happens if you believe in reincarnation? If you are a believer in reincarnation, there will be no.
You've got to use hands, folks, because.
Okay, sorry.
Because Wendy's waiting. Haven't forgotten you, Wendy. I'm coming to you. I just want to deal with death for a second. Morris.
It might take you more than a second.
Yeah, I hope it does. By the way.
By the way, the leader of the cult that he talked about, who got 120 years in prison, I just wanted to wish him a long life.
The point. I think it's a good one.
He doesn't die tomorrow.
I think the certainty of dying is a very dodgy certainty. I think we talked about this before. We actually believe that we are immortal. We know that people die. We know it. But the fact that we are alive and are still alive, there will never be a point where we will know we're dead. It won't happen. It's not part of life. Death is not part of life. We just won't know. Therefore, we will always be living, always, because at the point where we're not, we won't know.
Yes, of course. But that's what I mean when I say that the doubt is we know that we're going to die, but somehow we doubt it. And it is essential to us to doubt it. Otherwise, we couldn't go on.
Good point.
Who doubts? What, you guys doubt that you're going to die?
Wendy.
Yeah, well, I'm not really sure if the question is really fit into the subject. It's just when you were saying that the cult is really good at taking away doubt from people, but I'm not a religious person at all. But for me, in my mind, all religions kind of do that, but that's just from my personal view. So when Frank was saying that, with Christianity and you live in the anxiety, I understand that people doubt if they're doing the right thing, but there's no doubt in what should be the right thing. I kind of feel like it's kind of, all religions kind of just tell it as it is what it is. God is what it is, and the good thing is what it is, and just everything is what it is. So for me, I don't feel like it's only a specialty of any cult, but it's kind of like all religions and a lot of other things.
That's why rational pragmatism is so important. Well said.
Martin.
Yes.
You've got your hand up, right?
Yes, I raised it some time ago.
Good lad. Sorry, I didn't see it. I'm getting all excited about all the stuff that's going on here.
No, I was just thinking of all this discussion about certainty and uncertainty. I think that perhaps the only real aim of philosophy, the only real thing that objectively it attempts to achieve is to find some basis for one's own certainty in life, one's own existence. Hence Descartes, right? we talked about earlier, this gentleman here, Descartes, who found the necessity to prove his own existence, didn't he, as a start, right? And that's often, once he'd done that, he was able to, the rest of his philosophy is mainly concerned about will, isn't it? The imposition of the will. So that's really the basis of his philosophy. And maybe the only effort we're really making philosophically is to find some bedrock on which we can achieve some recognition of what we are, who we are, and what we are, and everything. Does that help much?
Yes, it all helps.
Does it? It helps a little. Well, I'm trying to emphasize that that's perhaps the only basis philosophy is to try and understand exactly what we are and why we exist.
I wouldn't say
basis of, I mean, before Descartes, you had the skeptics, right? The skepticism of Montaigne and this endless doubt that surrounded everything. He found the necessity to achieve some basis of certainty, hence the need to prove his own existence, and then from that, the existence of God.
But
from that, the rest of it was an effort of the will to base a whole philosophy on the basis of his intellectual effort and will. And that's really what we're always doing all the time.
Yeah. Descartes didn't find the actual exactness, and where he couldn't. What Descartes only could find that because of God. Otherwise, he was stuck.
Yeah, but once he'd proved the existence of God, he rather dispensed with him. He had no further use for him in his philosophy.
Well, once
his philosophy is concerned with methodology. It's very little to do with God. Once he had proved the existence of God, he rather dispensed with him.
But he didn't, though, because that was his his saving grace, if you excuse the expression.
He was a banal Christian, was Descartes. He had he was just an ordinary, very banal, ordinary Christian with no strong beliefs, religious or otherwise. He just conformed.
I think that
what his philosophy really did, I think, was to emphasize the importance of the self, the person, the ego. He placed the I in the center of the universe. Man became the center of the universe. After all the doubt of the previous century, the civil wars in France and so forth, he was able to establish a basis on which man could assert himself. And that's really what the whole of that intellectual century in France consists of, an attempt to reassert man in the center, place man again in the center of the universe. And that was really the basis of his philosophy.
Augustine?
Anyway.
Okay, thank you, Martin.
That was the argument about humanism and how we establish man at the center of the universe. So I wanted to go back to what Wendy said about religion and what is all the discussion about whether religion takes away doubt. And I think I agree, although I actually agree with that idea that religion, it's true that it can create anxiety because you have a moral code and then you have to act upon it. You have to decide what is right, what is wrong, but you already have a set of beliefs. I think the absence of religion gives you more anxiety in the sense that you eat and you have to find other places to hold rather. So I think that this is I'm discussing with a friend today about Sigmund Freud and talking about the same anxiety that culture makes to us. The idea that it gives us anxiety because it gives us a set of rules, culture as well, and we have to decide what we're doing is right or wrong according to that. So when we don't have a culture, when we don't have a religion, the anxiety is actually bigger. And that is, I was reading about the biography of Nietzsche, and Nietzsche defines problem when religion disappears. That is, that you really are on a boat on the sea, just navigating and not finding any island. As an island will be, for example, your culture, your religion, a piece of land where you can hold and maybe you have some anxiety there, but the more anxious is when you are sick. Religion takes away the doubt, and it is true that there's some anxiety, but the bigger anxiety is not to believe on anything. I'm not a religious person myself, but I think it's related with the topic. It is what it is. And because it is what it is also takes away the doubt. And to be honest, one of the beginnings of philosophy, it's even wondering about what is trivial, because, and that is how Socrates starts, for example. Suddenly, beauty is something that is quite obvious to all of us, but when suddenly we start asking about it, it's not that clear. So that's why I think it is worth that we go back to it is what it is, because I think it's one of the biggest challenges for philosophy, to challenge what is trivial.
Yes, but trivial is a very dodgy word, because what you mean what is fundamentally trivial, but there again, what is trivial for one person is not trivial for somebody else. It's a very interesting topic, though. James, you've got your hand up. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Descartes, doubt, led him to assert that his thinking, right, defines who he is. So he asserts that the rational self is what really is at the center of everything and is in control. And so from there, Kant takes over that rational idea, and he makes, the analytic, right, reason, a major part of his philosophy. And he builds on that, with the, rational critiques and so forth. And so that kind of doubt, that leads to believing that your thinking, your rational mind is in charge, leads to, Kant, Hegel, and so forth, and all these other philosophers that came after. And maybe that kind of rational thinking maybe goes back to Plato. And that is, kind of an illusion that also says, it is what it is, right? Is that similar to that idea of it is what it is? The analytic tautology, the rational analytic tautology of Kant. But it begins, it kind of is kind of like reinforced by Descartes, a belief in the rational definition of the self.
I am desperately trying to move you all away from analytic philosophy, and you keep on dragging me back in again. This is terrible. But you're right. But the point is, I'm trying to, if I need to tear apart, it is what it is, I need to tear apart the basis of analytic philosophy.
Exactly right.
And that might be a sin, but I intend to do it during the course of the next 5 or 6 hours.
But in order to do that, you also have to get away from this idea of the rational, notion of doubt, right? Rationalizing doubt and so forth. That goes, what was the problem with Descartes?
Possibly, but I'm going to show you. I'm coming to you, Carl. I can see you. It's okay. And Jay, I'm going to reasonably soon, if you'll take a strong drink, show you doubt, and that 2 and 2 is not necessarily 4. So hang on. All right. That kept you all quiet. Carl. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. That one I'm really looking forward to.
So am I.
It's not equals 4. I think I'm back to the novel 1984. Okay. So the way I look at it, and I'm not a professional philosopher. I think I lean more towards the philosophy as it relates to how to live a good life, as opposed to analyzing and labeling and definitions and all that stuff. But the way I look at it is what it is in the sense of reality and truth and search for truth. And I know, Ron, you said there's no such thing as the truth, but one of the biggest aspects of my personality is this need to understand. I'm driven by the need to understand. And when I see something that I doubt, I search for the understanding. And so I came to believe that you cannot understand what you doubt, but eventually you reach a conclusion that gives you that peace of mind and you go, aha, now I understand. Now I'm certain about this. So the way I look at it is what it is not in the sense of it is what it is and now let's forget everything and not move forward. I look at it is that it is as knocking down little pegs of things you don't understand. And as you reach that understanding, well, that's one less thing that you're sure of. And now you can keep moving towards things you don't understand and just keeps driving and driving. But I think that without this understanding, like you cannot understand unless you're certain about something. So eventually you got to come to, I mean, we live in this world because, I mean, we feel this peace of mind from understanding things. We know that when we go into a car and turn on the ignition, it will start.
Not always.
Unless something is wrong with it, and then it won't start.
There you have it. There you have it.
Yeah.
So we don't know that. And I'm still waiting for somebody to tell me what is certain.
So familiarity.
The sun rising is certain, or well, to go to your thing, 2 + 2 = 4 is certain.
Biden will win.
The sun doesn't rise every day in the North Pole. That's not certain there.
Understanding is an heightened.
How about Biden winning the elections?
Well, no, yeah, we're not certain
That's
about
not
that.
certain.
We're definitely not going to talk about that 2 days before, are we? There's enough, we're tense enough.
Yeah.
There's enough doubt.
Ron, can you go into this 2 + 2 = 4? Because that's one of the things I'm certain about, that 2 + 2 = 4.
What, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
Not from the point of view of timeless physics, but may I address?
I will show you it's not in a minute.
Hello, am I audible?
But hang on, I've got a hand up, JP.
Oh, sorry.
Well,
See, I go for the good people, the one that put their hands up. JP, you've got another point there, and another brownie point. Go for it. Where are you? JP, are you with us?
No, I feel like a goody two shoes and I don't know what to do. But yeah, I mean, well, now that we but I mean, now that we've, I guess, established that the only thing that's certain is that nothing is certain, which to me is kind of, you know, how you can say that, I'm not sure. Is there are such things as synthetic, since there are such things as synthetic a priori statements, and what that simply means is that trying to disprove them proves them to be true. To say there's that A can be not A is you know, if you in other words, if you want to be able to observe reality, you have to it cannot contradict itself. To observe that gravity is down or whatever it is, you have to be able to, it can't contradict itself. Reality has to be consistent with itself.
JP, I can show you can show you that the contradiction that it is and it is not a contradiction. I can show you that. I can show you that.
But I'm just saying, whenever there's a, okay, well, I look forward to it, but I'm saying, you know, there are such things as paradoxes in our world, but, you know, to say that false is true and true is false, you know, to say that the law of contradiction is, you know, I mean, I mean, try to explain that.
What is the law of contradiction?
What?
Oh,
One second.
The law of contradiction is you can't say that something, you can't say that something is true and false at the same time. You can't say.
Thank you.
That,
well, actually, you know, I can, and
I
can.
A is true.
And who's got? I can, and I do. And if you read my book, Time to Tell, you'll find it in there. and Terry is going to tell us definitely why there's no such thing as certainty.
Is that the entire basis of the rapidly expanding area of quantum computing is based fundamentally on the premise that you can have a bit that is both true and false at the same time. I mean, that is the textbook 101 definition of how you get into quantum computing. By the way, which I actually have some quibbles with some aspects of how they implement it. But you say that there's literally an industry being built upon the idea that you can have something that is true and false at the same time. Enormous sums of money are being spent on doing exactly that. So I think there's something needs to be examined a little more closely about what that premise means in terms of this actual universe that by its nature in the quantum level does not support that kind of thinking, not in the way that we think so. And one other quick observation, a theory that was popular about 10 years ago is what they call the false vacuum. And if there's anything you think is absolutely certain, that theory would undercut that, because it says at any time the entire universe might just decide to go poof. So your expectation in sun horizon XA in false vacuum theory, not if this wave of non-existence hits you, because then everything will simply stop to exist. So just put that in, toss that in also.
It was actually Hume who talked about the sun rising, and that we can't actually say it is definitely going to happen. Just because it's happened all the time throughout time does not mean it'll happen tomorrow. There is no justification for that, by the way. So who's got a hand up? Carl, you've got, and Najib's got a hand up. And
yeah,
hang on 1 second, Carl. I'm sorry. I think, Bill, you don't know how your hand, that blue hand works, so I accept your real hand. Go for it.
Mm-hmm.
No, can't hear you. Stop.
It helps me understand this discussion if I make a basic distinction between propositions and context. That is to say, all the discussion so far has been about the truth or non-truth of propositions. That seems less interesting to me than context usage of terms. And context seems to me to be the way to look at reality. If you talk about the sun rising issue, that's a context question. That's not about propositions being true or false. It depends upon perspective, and perspective depends upon context. And context is what tells us how to use our words, how to interact with one another, and the interdependent connections between us. If we can get rid of the propositional bias that is infecting the conversation, I think we're going to get clearer on a lot of stuff.
Well said. Wow.
Excellent. Carl. Frank,
yes,
in a minute.
I don't know if what I'm about to say is a context or proposition, but can't we all be certain that we are, each of us in our house or apartment, actually in a Zoom call discussing it is what it is? Would anybody deny that they're not certain about that?
Of course
right
I would
now?
deny it immediately.
How so?
I will deny it as well.
Might be in a dream.
I know.
Okay, so if you think you're in the Matrix, or
we could be in an indexical field filled with mental, spatial temporal dimension.
All right, fair enough.
Filled with mental projections.
We're all in the Matrix.
It's even more easy to discuss that. Basically, neuroscience. We are not reacting to the world. We are reacting to, or actually, neural connections. Or neural connections are saying we are in a Zoom call, then we believe we are in a Zoom call, and maybe we are not. We don't even have to be in a magic or dreaming. We are actually reacting to our own neural connections, not to reality. That's what.
So is that the brain in the vat thought experiment then?
You go wrong.
1 minute. I'm looking for a hat. Hang on.
Hey,
1 second. A hand. Martin.
Najib.
I have to leave you, my friend.
So I'll just
Martin.
thank you very much and say good night. I've got to eat. Good night.
Bye, bye, bye.
Martin.
See you.
Bye.
Can I query reality in that I can see?
Where's your hand?
My hand has been up, and then I bring it down, then I put it up. But I can see so many people, but I've also got some blank ones, and you seem to be able to see them. But I've got names without anything else, and I've got a large J, which is JP, but I can't see J, so I can't see whether his hand is up, or Julian, or Paul S, or Najib, because they're blank apart from their names.
That is true.
Oh, Richard, if you pull up your participant button, there should be a participant button on the bottom.
Yes.
If you pull it up, you'll see a list of all the participants.
No, but we want to see. We want to see faces.
I want to see their hands.
And from that, you can press your hand. You can see everybody's hands in there. You can raise your hand electronically, not on camera.
All right.
And that's how you're able to see everybody's hands. And that's what Ron is looking at, I believe.
Yes, but why am I not seeing Julian or Krishna Das or
Najib or Camille?
The camera doesn't work.
I can see everybody.
I'm here. Najib's here.
Who can you see? Okay, 1 minute. We've got Frank has been waving at me. Oh, there you are.
Okay. I'm trying to bring it down raw to the human level. Us.
That's
right?
what I've been trying to do.
That's good. So
With
I'll
great
help you a
difficulty.
little. If we all accept the fact that really we see reality, whatever that is, through our own perceptions, right? Then we are talking about the individual and the subjective view of understanding and seeing and viewing life. And therefore, if I personally feel that I'm certain about something, that's my perception, then surely I am certain, and you cannot take that certainty away from me because it's my subjective perceptive certainty.
I'm not bothered about your certainty, Frank. I'm not bothered about it because your certainty is subjective. So what?
But it's certainty for me.
That's okay. I allow you your certainty. I allow you it. I mean, but it means nothing. You can be certain that you're sitting on you're made of green cheese. You can be certain of that.
But for me,
that's okay.
It's not nothing.
I'm not going to take that away from you. If you think you're a green cheese, I would not deem to argue with you. But as far as I'm concerned, you're not, which is very lucky. Right?
Okay,
I mean,
but you do appreciate that we see, but it's according to the perception, right?
Everything is perception, but we're
exactly.
not. But we talked about that about three months ago, and you're dragging me back into it again. I've been trying to move into humans, and you keep on dragging me back into other stuff. I'm now gonna have Terry. You wanted to say something, right?
I'm not sure if it's still relevant, but when you mentioned part about certainty about what's going on there, so I just wanted to mention the concept of the honeypot, which is something used in cybersecurity. You do not necessarily know that what you're seeing on the screen is the reality that you think it is. And there are many, many examples, of course, of this in biology. And of course, just a simple con man, bringing it to a more human level. We all get conned at some point in our life. We are made to believe something is absolutely true. And then not only is it not true in any meaningful, broader sense, but we're being actively deceived for that belief. So the belief, and as this is something we've talked about before, certainty is an emotion, just like anger. The fact that I'm angry does not make something true. The fact that I feel certain about it does not make it true. There's a broader context where it has to be determined. So, but anyway, just the idea of honeypots. And even on a more human level, there are very real cases where in a medium like this, oh yes, you can be uncertain, as we got bombed one time by somebody who was falsely posing. So the world gets complicated.
Definitely.
Can I briefly respond to Frank and Terry?
Yes.
Terry,
Wendy, I can see you. I'm going to call on you. Don't worry, I can see it. But they're very urgent
Terry,
stuff here.
Terry, was that you who mentioned the concept of networks?
Yes, I was the one who mentioned networks.
So in response to Frank, who was talking about his own perception, I kind of agree with what Terry said, that yes, one person's perception is what they perceive, but if another person perceives the same thing, then there's a higher likelihood that it is true. And then if there's 7 billion people who see the exact same thing, then to me, I could be certain that it is true, no? Because the network is bigger.
Yes, and in fact, I would argue that the entirety of science and physics is nothing more than an elaboration of the networks of which we have the highest level of certainty.
Exactly.
And I can look at photons coming in from the other side of the universe, and they look like they're from elements just like the ones we see here on Earth. That was not known at one time. There was a time where nobody believed that was true.
Right.
And the fact that we can do that repeatedly has made people extend their network of certainty, always probabilistically, but they'd extend it and say, hey, there seem to be some things that really seem to be pretty solid.
Yeah.
But it might change. So there's always that uncertainty, but you build these networks. And what they do is, and this to me gets the concept of self. I define self, the idea of cognition, of sentience, is in terms of, do you leverage your ability to change the future path of the universe, or do you not? If you do not, and you say it is what it is, you've abdicated that entire possibility. Why? You
Free
made
will.
a choice to abdicate. So,
isn't free will an illusion?
Don't start on free will. Please.
We're going down a rabbit hole within a rabbit hole within a rabbit hole.
We'll be at each
I'm
other's
just
throats
reacting.
within a second. I'm going to mention free will later, but that's just before I run out of the room. At the moment, not yet. We'll be at each other's throats. Terry, you know I very rarely disagree with you, right? In this particular,
we agree on a lot of stuff. I absolutely agree.
In this particular point that Carl made and that you agree with, I do not agree. Because when you say that you see red and somebody else says, yes, I see red too, and all of us say that we see red, it tells me nothing about the red. But I do not know the red that you're seeing. And you don't know the red that I'm seeing.
Ron, we agree completely on that. I think we've had this conversation.
Yes, I know.
So I quality or that. I agree with that completely.
So why did you agree with Carl?
I wasn't talking about red. I was talking about 1 + 1 = 2.
No, 1 and 1 is not 2 at all. But,
okay,
but that's something else.
Okay.
Wendy.
Because red is subjective.
Wendy, save me. Come in. Say what you want to say.
Well, I was just really curious about when you, and I think it was Terry or Richard, I don't remember, when you guys were talking about what is true can be not true. I guess in that way, it is what it is can be, it is not what it is not. So I was just curious when you say that you can show that. I was curious about that whole universe. Because I just have no clue about that.
Can you?
Yeah, I think this talks about our contextual differences that William Daniels brought up, which I thought was fascinating. I think our contextual differences, they shed light on the contradictions upon which our existential worldview is built. Contradictions, after all, are utility maximizing value meme systems or gambits of some sorts that we addressed earlier. Of course, they're big business, quantum computing and all that stuff. They're utility maximization engines. But I'd like to bring the conversation back to religion and certainty. My phone got disconnected half an hour ago. But I heard someone say that, religion sows the seeds of doubt and things like that. But if you look at everybody who participates in marathons or the Olympics or some sort of sports, as soon as they win, the first thing they do is they thank Jesus Christ for all the confidence and the certainty with which they've, their paths was guided and things like that. So they always seem to fall back on religious mysticism as the root for their non-yielding faith in whatever vocation they're doing, at a particular point in time. So religion does sometimes give amazing amounts of confidence to people who might, otherwise be doubting and their initial predispositions.
Najib, I would powerfully agree with what you just said, because the doubting part is a certain part of both Catholicism, aspects of the Calvinistic threads, but not all aspects of that one either. In other areas, a problem that we've been having, frankly, in the US is extreme belief and absolute certainty that what you are doing is so right that you let a couple million people die for it. Because, you know, the COVID stuff, it doesn't really matter compared to the other goals that you have. That has been a very real issue for us here. And it's terrifying because that is one of the reasons why people that you would think might object against to these incredible policies of just saying, let's casually let this COVID spread everywhere, say nothing because they have a certainty that there's some other goal that goes on with that. So it's, yeah, I think there are multiple threads in the religious side, and some of them can lead to very high levels of confidence and certainty.
Right. I see Mr. Daniels has his hands raised up.
Yeah, the big difference in religion, as I understand it, is the difference between faith and idolatry. Idolatry is about making objects the reality, the certain object, the tree, the bush, whatever it is that is your article of faith. But faith is a matter of doubt. It's an uncertainty that you have to overcome and renew every day because you're in doubt that it's really true. And it's not a matter of true or false, it's a matter of commitment. And faith is commitment, and it's riven with doubt, it seems to me. And that's what its dynamic is. But when you idolatrize something, when you create objects that are supposed to be the deity itself, instead of an elusive impression, a religious emotion, or something which gives you no doubt or no certainty, you have a different kind of animal. And that's what religion is about. It's confidence in the uncertainty.
So if is existence a contradiction? And if so, does it require a blind belief in order for it to persist?
It's not a blind belief, in my view. It's about a belief that you have to renew and reaffirm all the time because things happen. Problem of evil is one thing that has created a whole question about Mike Pence flies that come in my head. But that's the idea. Anyway.
Is it possible that there's a religious gene and that most of the people who had this gene left England for America? And this is why we as a secular society, where we're sensible, America has this mad society.
It just really gets me. You know, I see a lot of religious belief as a matter of reason, not faith. You know,
irrational rationality.
Have you read a little bit about Aquinas?
Aquinas?
Yeah.
A long time ago. Can't remember very much about it, but it seems to me that you can't say you're a total atheist because there's always a slight amount of doubt, but I'm certainly a very strong agnostic.
No, he was the first psychologist, if I'm not mistaken.
How did the universe create itself?
By way of our language, our extramental, self-referential.
I would answer that with, how did God create himself?
By the language that self-reflects upon
God
itself.
is. God is the unmoved mover, the uncaused cause.
I think
And the universe is the
language.
unmoved mover.
We're moving into speculation here, folks.
I think we're drifting.
We're more than drifting, we're drowning.
It's the language.
No.
Yeah, but like, some people are saying that, the only thing that is certain is that everything's uncertain. I mean, so you contradict yourself.
They're
and
relative. No, they are relative
to
terms,
saying that religious
JB.
people, I mean, it's like you don't even address the point. You just kind of
they are
move
relative
on,
terms.
contradiction, and you're self-satisfied.
Certainty versus uncertainty are relativistic terms based on which worldview you operate from. There's a book called Spiral Dynamics that talks about the conflicting value meme systems that different people face at different parts of the globe, and how they try to move up the stack or down the stack, and it's just a tedious process. So again, certainty versus uncertainty, I feel like these are relativistic terms based on which worldview you're operating from.
Language relates to each other. Like languages relates to each other, but language is based on the structure of reality, and reality cannot contradict itself. Otherwise, you would be unable to observe it. If you were to say that gravity goes up and gravity goes down, and it contradicted itself, we would have no perception of reality. We would not be able to.
No, I mean,
it.
what you see is all there is.
Why you have to explain how observation comes about. How's observation served?
So what you see
is how's observation how can
symbolical
we even
observation is symbolical differentiation.
Isn't,
I think it is what it is, basically.
Symbolical differentiations. I mean, we are symbolically differentiating machines. You know, I mean, so observation is nothing but fields of indexical signification through which inference is made. And what supports this inference mechanism is the linguistic model that we use. And the linguistic model that we use is dualistic. It's self-referential, it's extramental. It presupposes a whole bunch of things that are not necessarily logically true, yet we believe in them in order for us to maintain civilization and order. That doesn't mean that it's logically valid. It just means that it has a certain utility, right? That supports a certain kind of.
But it's not simply a matter of utility. That's what I'm saying. Like,
it's all utility. What do you mean?
We define thing. We've created a word called up, and we've created a word called down. But to define up as down is contradictory. So it's not simply a matter of defining things, like, because
there is a utility to it, though.
As being not a definition.
I mean, if you're looking to disorient. Sorry.
Wendy,
if you're looking to disorient
hang on.
person.
Sorry, Wendy, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, it was still about the same question, because I'm not sure if I understood. I understand my question better from Naj's answer earlier about the whole, when you were saying, you can show what is true, can be not true. It's just the whole, what it is can be what it is not at the same time. I was just thinking of is it just a matter of context, or is there like a more concrete example or explanation that can help me to understand that, or that can help me to see that? Or I thought it was Richard Montero who was talking about quantum computing.
Can I please just a quick answer here? I was reading Richard Sapolsky's book earlier, and he said that, I mean, we don't want to talk about free will. Ronald has a schedule for that, but he was talking about how fragile human beings are. If you put them in an uncomfortable position and you ask them a question, they will most probably give you a negative type of answer. If you sit them on a very nice fluffy couch and you ask them the same question, you're going to receive a higher probability of them giving you a more positive answer. Just shows you how easy it is to manipulate human answers based on the environment or the context in which they're sitting. So what we usually do is, there's a fallacy in psychology. It's called the fundamental attribution bias. And this basically, we assume so much on certain behaviors that people exhibit, thinking that these behavioral tendencies stem from within, not giving proper credence to the fact that the environments usually control how people behave. So I don't know if that answers your question directly, maybe in an indirect manner, but it just shows you how easily it is to manipulate people's sense of truth based on the couch they're sitting on.
We're back to truth, folks. We're back to truth, which we discussed ages ago. I don't mind doing it again another time, but we're moving away, and I know that truth is the most important thing there is, but just I settled that ages ago to say there is no such thing. So just accept that.
Well, wait a second. We have to give light to it, because when you talk about tautology,
I was being facetious.
Okay. But I'm saying, like,
favorite position.
We can't talk about tautologies unless we talk about truth. It's impossible.
Can we hear what Ron is saying concerning what is it is what it is, and why he thinks 2 + 2 is not 4, for example? I like to hear the argument proceed, and then we can dispute later. But first, we need to understand what Ron is trying to say.
Yes,
that's quite a good idea, I think. I would like to understand what I want to say, because I'm going to show. I'm going to show that A is a tautology, and I'm going to show it by a slide that everybody will leap upon me Just hang on. I've got to share screen.
Are you sitting in a comfortable chair, Ron? Make sure it's a comfortable chair.
Right. Can you all see this? Yes? Is everybody with me?
Yes.
Oh, because I can't see you. Okay. So what I want to show you is the following. A is a tautology, right?
Yep. Right.
But not really, because there are no two exactly the same things. So when I say that A is A is A is A, all I'm saying is A. That's all I'm saying. If I say that Jack is Jack, that's a tautology. Jack is Jack. That's Jack. That's it. So this A is abstract. There's no time. There's no space. There's nothing to differentiate them. There's no space between them. And I'm not the first one to say this, but Leibniz law, he said that if two objects have all the same properties, they are in fact one and the same. And this would be considered a tautology, right? So what is A? A plus A is A, because they're supposed to be the same. So that it's actually 1A. So when I come to 2, and 2 plus 2 is actually 2, because if these are the same, then it's only 2. It's not 4. Is anybody
sorry,
still?
Ron, I disagree.
Wait, I know, of course you are going to disagree with me. How can you not disagree with me? How can you not? But hang on, I haven't even finished yet. I haven't started yet. Just hang on, all right? So the only way that you can add things up is when they're different, not the same. So, so 2 and 2, if they're the same, would be 2. There cannot be anything else because they're the same. There cannot be 4. There can only be 4 if 2 is different from 2. And the only way you can do that is when you first of all, they have to be different. And the only way they are different is when you add time and location. When you put them in the world, so that when you have 2 dogs, and 2 dogs have no problem with 4 dogs, because you have space and time here, right? So now you may say to me, yes, but then we have to define dogs. And I say, no, we don't, because we know what dogs are approximately. It's good enough for me to say that a dog with 1 ear is still a dog, and a dog with no legs is still a dog, and you'll agree with me. And that is the approximation of language. And if you read my book, Time to Tell, I have a whole section of approximation of language, and somebody talked about context before, and that if we do understand each other because of the context, we stop understanding each other when we start defining. If we start defining what a dog is, we won't be able to add them up because we moved out of context and going deep into language. It only works, and everything works when it's approximate. Everything is approximate. That's why I kept on asking me, tell me something that's not approximate. Show me something that's certain.
Everything is an idea.
That's why 2 and 2 is not necessarily 4. 2 and 2 is only 4 when the 2s are different, not when they're the same. Thank you.
Right. So, Ron, if I may reply.
I was afraid you would, yes.
Well, no, because I'm totally in agreement with you about this whole sense of differentiating the sense of analytical philosophy versus what I call practical philosophy, right? In humans in this world. And when you said 2 + 2 = 2, when they're the same, okay, I agree with that.
Wow.
When you went to 2 dogs + 2 dogs = 4 dogs, I went, oh, yes, that's reality. When I have that argument with people at a restaurant and I say 1 + 1 = 2, and they say no, and they go into all the analytical part, I go, well, do you see 2 glasses? 1 glass + 1 glass. Do you see 2 glasses? And then they continue with the analytical. Now, if I did the same argument with you right now and say, okay, I have 1 bat and I have another bat, and I'm gonna beat you over the head with 1 bat, then I'm gonna beat you over the head with the second bat. Would you like me to do that or not? And you would say, no, because you agree that there are actually 2 bats and not 1 bat.
Correct.
So that's all I was gonna say.
Correct. Next time you go for a meal, invite me and I will talk to your friends. All right. Terry.
Ron, we know that we both had this discussion before, but I never saw you present it quite the way you just did. And I just realized something I never noticed before. Are you intentionally or accidentally talking about quantum mechanics? Because you are. The reason is this. Quantum mechanics kicks in when you get to the point where you can no longer tell what 2 things are because there's no information to distinguish them from each other. At that point, physics completely unravels. This is so well proven, it's not even debatable, but the very basis of why particles exist, why things bump into each other, is based on the mathematics of that concept, that electrons can't tell each other apart. And when they can't tell each other apart, they can't be added. They are the same thing. They're only the same. The only time you get a difference in physics is when you have that additional information you just described that makes them different, but also approximate. So I'm fascinated by the way you presented that. I had not thought of it in the way you're doing it, but there are things in this universe that can be the same, but guess what? They don't work the way classical logic tells us that they work. Because when there is no space and time to distinguish them, they suddenly become indeterminate in a whole different way that you can't do logic on. They no longer add together. They no longer have separateness. They no longer have countability. So I'm sorry I'm getting a little bit too deep in that, but I was
thank you. Thank you.
Isn't that what purgatory is all about?
So before somebody...
Maybe, perhaps.
Now, before somebody tells me that that there is, you can't have something that is and isn't, be careful, because I will show you that that doesn't work either.
I don't want to say that.
Yeah, Richard,
I
yes.
understand the concepts, but I think that you're using 2 different ideas there, because when the Sumerians, I think it was them, invented the whole number system, their numbers, their strokes in the sand or whatever, was so that they could tax the people. And so 1 stroke meant a goat. So you are actually using it, if you like, as a metaphor for something, I'll use real in inverted commas, in the real world. So you are actually saying those numbers stand for things. Whereas when you're talking about an abstract A and another A, I totally agree with you. And when you're talking about 2 as an abstract, I agree. But if you talk about 0, that 0 is the space in a gourd that has nothing in it, that the Buddhists meditated on and saw it as nothing. And that's where we got 0 from. So all these things actually have a whole baggage of ideas with them. And you can't escape that baggage. And they all relate to something that is something else, if you like, something in the world as we know it. And that's where the context is important.
Richard, somebody wrote a book called Nothing Matters.
Yes, I know. And I know who it was.
And everything you just said about nothing, this person wrote about it and mentioned everything that you said, more or less, but of course, much better.
Of course, of course.
And Ron and Richard,
but when I write poetry, it's much better than when I try and explain things in logic.
I know. It's easier to write than it is to talk. I know that. I'll be with you in a second. Wendy, Augustine, you got a hand up. Yes, go for it.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me well. I think, yeah, you can now. Yes, so I just wanted to add to that explanation, which I agree actually, that the main difference is that equality and identity are not the same things. As you well said, Ron, so identity means something is identical to the same thing and it's the same thing, but equal can be different things that are equal to, like things like 2 dogs and another 2 dogs are equal to 4 dogs. But a dog is only identical to itself. And that goes to the same problem that Carl was saying about the discussion in the restaurant and give you a glass of water. So yes, of course, 1 glass of water plus another water, true, they are equal, but the glass of water, both of them, they are not identical, because if they were identical, there will be only one.
Exactly.
That's a huge difference. That's the principle like this of identity. That's the whole difference between what is identical and what is equality, and that is what is underlying here, in my opinion.
And that
is that the transitive? Is that the transitive property of equality that you guys are referencing, where it says things that are equal to the same thing are also equal to one another?
No, what we're saying is basically that there is a difference between what is equal to other things and what is identical to other thing, because things that are identical to itself are the same thing, while things can be equal to other things. Like 2 plus 2 can be equal to 4. However, 2 plus 2 is identical to 2 plus 2.
This is where I think I'm finally glomming on to what Ron has been talking about and trying to explain to me actually for some time offline. But this idea that if you don't get some level of approximation, this idea of more than one of something doesn't really exist. And you have to have this, you have to have approximation in order to have things that are countable, which I think is an interesting kind of a thought. The other comment I was going to make is in terms of that, what Richard said, those accumulations of ideas like the gourd. I didn't know that about the gourd. That's fascinating about the zero coming from an empty gourd. Those are very hard to come by. We don't realize how hard these little insights like what is zero is to come by. The imaginary numbers, it took them almost at least, well, several centuries, I'm not sure, about 5 centuries total before they really developed that concept to the point where it was useful and intuitive. But these things come slowly, and we take this for granted, so many things that have incredible amounts of thought put into them. I just like the word dilemma. Dilemma means 2 problems with contrary solutions. People don't think about that when they think of the word dilemma. And yet somebody back in Greece put a lot of thought into that idea and enabled us to then leverage it so simply.
I would like to actually say, sometimes when we use the word equals, in logic, there's, rather than just having 2 lines, you can have 3 lines, and that's equivalence. And sometimes one uses equals when one means equivalence, and they aren't actually equal to each other. Equivalence is fairly close to equals, but it isn't the same. Yes, and sometimes we're mixing up the 2 different things, I think.
The equal sign is extremely problematic, as Augustine said, extremely problematic. I mean, we sort of go past it and say that equal to that, but there's a hell of a lot inside that. 2 things being equal is extremely problematic, and you're right, Augustine. It's a thing. Wendy, you've been very patient. Your turn.
Well, yeah, I was just wondering if I understood what you were saying right. 'Cause for me, the only way for me to understand what you've represented earlier is when you say sand plus sand is still sand, but then at that moment we're just talking about the definition, we're talking about the content, we're talking about sand is sand. But if we're not talking about the definition or the content, what it is, then it becomes the quantity or anything else, and then in that way the whole 2 plus 2, like 2 2 grams of sand plus 2 grams of sand is not going to be 2 grams of sand. I don't know if is that what you're trying to say? Did I understand it right? Or
no, that's right. That's right. So you can only count things when the numbers are not abstract, when they belong to something. 2 grains of sand plus 2 grains of sand are 4 grains of sand. And the grains of sand don't have to be the same. They can't be the same. They're different, but it doesn't matter because we know what a grain of sand is. So you can add them up. There are some languages that don't, Icelandic, I think, they don't know what you mean when you just give a number. You can't just say 4, say 4 what? It's an extremely, it's completely abstract. It doesn't mean anything until you add it to something, but in mathematics, they're used. But they don't refer to anything. It's a complete abstract language, completely.
it actually reminds me of the Chinese, because I'm Chinese. It actually reminds me of the Chinese language. So when you can say this is pig, you don't need to say this is. There's no plural when you say this is. These are pigs, or you just say this is pig. But when you want to say 1 pig or 2 pigs or 3 pigs, between the number 1, 2, 3 and the non-pig, there's actually a specific word to connect them. So whenever we want to describe some concrete objects, when you say 1 table, we don't say 1 table, you say 1 something table. And for different nouns, you have different specific words that connect the number to the noun. So anyway, it's just what you were just saying actually reminds me of that, makes me think of the whole language.
Extremely interesting. Very, very interesting. Brilliant. So can I move on to it is what it is? I think that's where we started a while ago. Anybody else want to say anything? I'm surprised you accepted what I said. I'm extremely delighted by the fact that you accepted the madness that I just put on the screen. I thought, you know, when I first thought of it, I thought it can't be. But the more I looked at it, the more I realized there's something there. And I'm pleased that Terry actually said that I made some sense. But I mean, I can see the sense, but I can't get mathematicians to agree to it. Not pure mathematicians, because they just don't go for it.
Ron, isn't there a strange loop going on in the language that we're using? I mean, connecting things together. It's like, excuse me, Escher's strange loop. I mean, this reminds me of what is it called? Paper, scissors, rock. Right? Rock is better than scissors. Scissors is better than paper. Paper is better than rock. So rock is better than rock. It just doesn't make sense. So there's a sort of contradiction or some sort of something logically invalid that's deep into the language that we use.
Najee,
that's mostly. Go ahead.
Oh no, I didn't mean to cut you. I was agreeing with you strongly, because one of the things, Gödel's theorem, the great famous theorem.
That's it. Yep.
The great famous theorem by Gödel, in many ways, if you look at it carefully, all it is really doing is saying that everything has time in it. And that if you don't acknowledge the existence of the time flow, if you don't acknowledge that A is no longer A, but you have a sequence, then you get into paradoxes that are like looping back on something that no longer exists. And it is, in fact, one of those hidden, strange Escher, what was the term again? Escher's?
Strange loop.
Strange loop. But it's very easy to introduce these strange loops in logic. One of the problems I think, and I would put this as an interesting issue with the entire history of logic, is it tends to ignore the fact that, as apparently the Chinese language does do, like Wendy said, I thought that was very interesting, Wendy, we disconnect this number from this idea of what it is we're actually attaching it to. And there's a danger in that, because you're detaching it from the human perception that made the number possible. And human perception is a very complicated, difficult thing. On that point, I'm speaking as a cognitive scientist. It's not easy to do that part of it. That's the hard part. The easy part is the 1 + 1 = 2. That's the trivial part. The really tough part is saying one of what? One of what? Why do I add them? Why do I allow them to be added? Why do I think they're the same? the complexity in those issues is just astonishing. And by the way, Wendy, I like the yellow theme you have going on that. I like the color in your room there. So the yellow lighting, as well as the background that Carl has. Carl, your background is so good that I didn't realize it wasn't real for a while. Usually those things show up when you move, I can see it, but a couple of good backgrounds today. So just.
I realize there's chat going on. There's a sort of subversive room of people talking and stuff. And now and again, it pops up. I can't look at it, but I'll see it. I'll see it later. It all comes out because somebody just mentioned the morning star and the evening star. Who just, was that you, Carl? Somebody wrote about the evening star is the morning star. Because interesting, you mentioned that. I was gonna. Somebody put it. Come on, own up. It's not.
I said it.
Nothing terrible will happen to you. Lucas,
rose-colored glasses.
I said it.
Oh, good. Where are you? Anyway, okay, that's fine because I was going to mention that. The point about it is what it is. It's not the example of tautologies. It's a very special one. The point about Venus, that Kripke made this in 1972, that Venus is Venus, which cannot be faulted. But actually, I can, of course. I would say it's not because I'd put in the element of time. But for that, you'd have to read my book. Sorry, I can't give all the secrets away tonight. But Venus is the morning star is not a tautology, and Venus is the evening star is also not a tautology because you're giving information. Okay, but let's look at something else that's interesting. That Jack is Jack, right? It's a tautology, but it goes to the law of identity, that each thing is identical to itself. So as I said before, Leibniz said if two objects have all the same properties, are in fact one and the same. Okay, the same property means the same location at the same time. So so when we say that Jack is Jack, it sounds frivolous, but it isn't. Let's say that we know Jack and Jack has a stroke. Is Jack still Jack? Although we will say Jack is Jack, is it Jack? You
can't cross the same river twice, Ron.
For example.
You're going back to Plato.
Of course, everything goes back to Plato.
There you are, Plato. So there's an ideal Jack out there. And all the Jacks are just parts of the same Jack.
But of course, I'm dead against that, as you know.
Yes.
I don't accept that at all. Neither do I accept Kant's the thing in itself, as you know. So I don't know about this ideal Jack, but my question is, this Jack that we see, is that the same Jack?
If it's through perception, then it's different.
The only constant is change, Ron.
If two people see the two Jacks, they're looking at it differently.
No.
And each one has his own perception of the Jack, so they're different.
No, but
appearances are deceiving.
No, hang on. Jack had a stroke. Is that the same Jack who was in the room a week ago? You would call him Jack, but why? Is it the same Jack? His mind is gone. Is it the same Jack? I'm not asking for an answer. It's a very difficult question. That's identity.
You could say that Jack is not himself, which is another sort of cliche or contradiction, or perhaps in the line of it is what it is. That we say, oh, Jack is not himself, or I am not myself. What do we mean about that? That
what constitutes
we understand that, but it seems like a contradiction, but we say that too in the same line of it is what it is.
Ron, My concern is that if everyone in this group attempts to greet this hypothetical Jack, then your conversation will end up being hijacked. Sorry.
True.
That was unnecessary.
True.
Sorry.
No, it's very necessary. Very necessary. Trust me.
Yeah, I think there's a utility, Ron. I think there's a utility to saying that is the same Jack. Just gonna further facilitate communication and, you know, have people go about their day-to-day businesses in a more seamless way. You know, maybe if every second you're going to be bombarded with questions about whether or not is this Ron, is this the Ron that I spoke to 5 minutes ago or 7 minutes ago, I don't think any communicative flow will take place. So I think there's a utility to calling the same person the same name, even though we're not the same person from moment to moment. As you know, you can't cross the same river twice.
Yeah, that's what I meant when I said it's a matter of context, and it's approximation. Right. That we know that people are not the same over time, and yet it's good enough for us to call that same person. It's approximately okay. We can live with it, and that's, I think, is another way of saying what you just said, Najib.
I mean, that's why semantic coherence. Let me just very important point. That's why there's a YouTube seminar. I think I had posted on the virtual user group. It talks about semantic coherence and how dangerous it is to flip-flop from one semantic net to another semantic net to another semantic net, so on, as being a barometer that shows whether or not people are going to suffer from cognitive ailments down the road. If people are constantly shifting from one semantic, sense of familiarity to another semantic net full of certain kind of familiarities, then the onset of mental illness will be precipitated at a much faster rate. So that's a very interesting point, and I'll make sure to share it with you, Ron, again after this session, if you'd like to share with all the participants afterwards.
It just occurred to me who you are, Najib. I didn't realize you're the one from the virtual muser.
Yes, it's me.
Oh, great.
I'm back.
Wonderful.
By the way, isn't saying that we can't cross the same river twice or that all things change, isn't that a certainty?
Of course.
Very good question, Carl.
Thank you.
Get out.
It's a certainty from the point of view of objective logical coherence, logical consistency. It's not a certainty from the subjective view that's full of confirmation bias and contradictions. I mean, that's one of the main tenets of objective truth. The only point of the scientific method is not to fool you into believing that something is true that is not, or that something is not true that is. That is a very, very important point worth distinguishing.
Oh, well, I won't disagree with that. I'm a big fan of the scientific method.
Great.
Can we deal with some problems?
Well, it's not something that people follow. It's just the truth that just stands by itself.
JP, you have your hand up.
So I guess I only follow a little bit of this, but I mean, aren't you basically mixing arithmetic and categorical variables in what you're doing there? I mean, it doesn't seem to me that, I mean, I can see a place where there is an abstraction that doesn't need to be instantiated. So it is an example, in other words, in programming, there's things such as classes and objects. You have a dog class that has certain, attributes to it, the color of the hair of the dog, and none of this is instantiated yet until, you create a dog that, but we know that all dogs have, four legs, and we have all these, you have the instances there of the dog called Sally, or, the human being called, John or Wendy or whatever it is. But that doesn't mean that the abstraction doesn't exist. I mean, it's there in reality because it that's the premise by which you can instantiate anything. I mean, I don't see this as a refutation of the truth. you know, just because, you know, you're mixing categorical and arithmetic variables. And I'd even like to address some of the quantum stuff. I mean, part of the thing is, you know, yeah, there are paradoxes in reality that we still have to resolve with quantum physics and relativity and all these things. And some of these go past my depth. But at the same time, you know, just because something is probabilistic and just because we've observed it doesn't mean that there isn't some consistency to it. I mean, yes, there's some uncertainty, you know, but as soon as we observe the particle, it does assume a state. And I don't think that means that we have to throw out the idea of the truth because there's an uncertainty in where the particle is before. And I mean, you know, I mean, we still have to be able to use. I still don't understand. I don't find it. I just don't find it convincing to be able to say that not A is A at the same time, same place, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, you know, I don't understand. What proof do you have of that?
Terry, yes.
JP, first to comment, you clearly have a programming background, which I could resonate with immediately when you talked about classes. Poke around on Stack Exchange and look for something I said about object-oriented programming and its connection to physics, because I was addressing some of the very issues you're talking about. It's years old, but it's out there somewhere, and got a good response from that. But I was talking about how that aspect of the abstraction is far more based on physics than I think we give it credit for it sometimes. Regarding the physics about the uncertainty, now that's a rich area of debate from many physicists, and some do feel there's an absolute superdetermined reality that's there. That superdeterminism, in fact, is the name for it. A very common belief in physicists that everything is absolutely determined and absolutely certain. However, every one of the physicists who believes that will immediately qualify and say, and of course it's completely inaccessible and we can never see it and we don't know what it is. So you wind up gutting it the instant that it gets stated by saying that we can't do that. The nature of the uncertainty goes much deeper than just saying that we don't know where it is. When you have two electrons, you don't know, you cannot tell which is which, and it actually drives the mathematics that makes reality possible. Literally, the fact that we, hold on a second. The fact that we have substance, the fact that I can take my fist and pound them together is based on the mathematics of not being able to determine whether one electron is the same electron or not. And there's no way you can get into the explanation of why that is in this, but it is a profound and deep aspect of reality that what we don't know actually allows what we have to exist in a way that goes far deeper than just saying there's particles that we don't quite know where they're at. No, it's more than that. And you never have a true particle, by the way. That is an absolute falsity. All you do is wave packets, they shrink. They shrink small, the more energy you put in, the smaller they get. They never, ever turn into actual particles. That is a complete falsity that is propagated by the terminology, but you cannot find any example of it, nor will you ever. It would require infinite energy to do so.
All I'm saying is that this is yes, there are paradoxes. We still haven't been able to resolve them. But again, all these things that require observation, and if all these things require observation, they can't contradict themselves. Otherwise, we would be unable to observe them. How can you observe? How can you observe the speed of light or be able to derive it if you can't observe it? You wouldn't, like, you're like essentially what the conclusion that we're drawing here is first of all, there's no metaphysics, and second of all, there's no basis for observing any physics whatsoever. If you say there's no truth to it,
relative
that you
truth.
can contradict yourself. You can contradict yourself then. So you
Then,
can contradict. So physics is refuted.
Observation can be consistent but logically invalid. Observations can be consistent yet be logically invalid. I mean, half-truths, because they serve a certain kind of utility. I mean, Socrates, he mentions this. He talks about this 4,000 years ago. He says, the truth is a statement which can't be disproven at all. In logic, an argument is valid if and only if it takes a form that makes it impossible for the premises to be true and the conclusion to be false. It's not required for a valid argument to have premises that are actually true, but to have premises that, if they were true, would guarantee the truth of the argument's conclusion. A formula is valid if and only if it is true under every single interpretation. And that argument form is valid if and only if every argument of that logical form is valid.
Yeah,
So,
you phrase it in terms of if statements, and that's what I'm saying is that the idea that the only true statements that we have, which is what's kind of the course of this discussion, is essentially there are two statements. There's either hypothetical statements, the if statements that you just mentioned, or there's definitional ones, the tautology stuff. And what I'm saying is, in each case, you can prove that there are statements that exist outside of hypothetical and definitional statements, because if you say the statement that everything is uncertain, you are contradicting yourself, because you just said a certain statement. So or same thing with everything is a hypothetical statement.
Who would in the right mind say everything is a uncertain thing or everything is certain? Who in the right mind would say something so universally contradictory or illogical?
Well, basically,
you're talking in absolutist terms, but nothing is absolutist. Everything is relativistic. So I don't understand your premise.
Well, I mean, because
that
if
sounds pretty absolutist
then
to me, what you just said, Najib. So what you just said self-contradicted yourself.
Yeah.
So I'm speaking in response to what
how so?
just said. Well, you said everything is relative. So isn't that a statement in itself that pronounces something that is absolute? So in a way, you've contradicted
Can you
yourself.
disprove that everything is not relativistic?
Sure. I can, and so can you, but I don't need to bring that in. All I'm trying to say is that JP is bringing out that not only are there hypothetical statements, but also categorical statements that can be tested and as well as observed to be true. And now you're just talking about some analytic statements that may or may not be necessary and sufficient for what you're trying to bring out. I'm not denying any of that because I don't need to. What I'm trying to bring out is what JP is talking about. Is he's showing you that what you have been describing, or maybe the majority of what people are, including Terry and so on, are not talking about reality, because he's talking about reality. And so I'm just standing.
What is reality? And from his point of view, I'm just curious. What is the reality that he's espousing?
Can I jump in and give an example?
I'm not going to talk about that because this is not the topic. The topic here is about it is what it is. And I like to hear more about what Ron wants to say.
I just want to make sure that you're sitting in a comfortable chair, because again, relativism versus absolutism depends on the kind of chair you're sitting on.
I reckon basically it is what it is. That's my opinion. So let me show you some problems. If everybody's still game and you're all sleeping an hour longer, so it's okay. There are problems here, in case you haven't realized it. Those are small problems you've been talking about. Let's look at another logical tautology. You're either hungry or you're not, right? That's always true. It includes both possibilities, no? But what about let's change that to either it's what it is or it's not what it is. How does that work? Strange, isn't it?
Can you repeat that, Ron? Sorry, you were inaudible.
I'm not sure I can, actually. I said, first of all, you're either hungry or you're not. That's fair, right? That's always true, right? It includes both possibilities, right? But now let's put in the what we're doing, it is what it is, and let's put that in there. Let's say either it is what it is, or it's not what it is. Now here we're sort of stuck. So something's not working here. It can be even worse. I can say it always is what it is, or it never is what it is. We're even more stuck, I think. There's something about it is what it is that's something more. And that when I started looking into it, I suddenly realized there's something here that's not with the others. And I'm trying to work it out. It might be the it. It might be a problem of it. But so now that's only a small problem. It gets worse. So hang on to your seats, folks. It's much worse than 2 and 2 is 2. Trust me. Okay, so first of all, it is always what it is, because that's fate. I mean, it has to be, right? It is what it is because in retrospect, that's what's happened. It is what it is. It always is. It is what it is. That's what we call fate. All right. In other words, what I'm saying is there is no road not taken. That doesn't exist. There cannot be. The road you took is the road you took, and that's fate. That's where we are. So it is always what it is. All right. And yet, and here comes the difficult part. They both exist. They both exist together as part of ourselves in the world. There's a contradiction that clashes and makes us what we are. It is what it is, and it isn't what it is, right?
So, Ron, just a quick interjection here. What did Einstein mean in relation to what you just said when he said the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion?
He was wrong.
Okay. Are you sure about that?
Yep, positive. He was wrong.
Why? Why was he wrong in your view?
You'll have to read the book. I can't remember, but he's wrong. I go into that. Look, it's possible. No, I'm being facetious when I say he's wrong, right? It's just to wake you up. There are certain things he said that we think he said that he didn't really say. And there are lots of examples of them. And I mentioned some of those. Yes, Terry.
I will. What he just said about Einstein, I will have to agree. It is correct. Einstein, because he actually consoled a friend once.
Yes.
Saying that as far as I can tell,
right,
nobody ever really dies. The future. Einstein was one of the first examples. Minkowski was actually a little earlier. He's the one that he got the idea from. He was a super determinist. Now, at that time, they called it just determinisms or worldviews. You hear this in relativity all the time. Everything is predetermined. It's a giant crystal, a giant block universe. There are serious problems with that are being dealt with in physics these days about whether that is or is not true. Now, there are many physicists who absolutely are. One of my favorite arguments is superdeterminism used to be looked down on. And I've been pointing out some physics forums that if you believe in determinism at all, you have to be a superdeterminist. You have to assume that the galaxy a billion years ago knew what you were going to do with the telescope today. So you have to be, everything has to be in place. There are alternatives. So I just think it's a more complex thing. And Einstein had a lot of problems with how he interpreted himself, even in the way he phrased it. It says, as best I can tell.
Yep.
It seems to be this way. He had his doubts about it. He didn't feel comfortable with it, but he did say that.
I think Mr. Daniels has his hand raised.
I do just want to say that without being facetious, I did actually deal with that particular sentence of Einstein and showed that I do not agree. I won't say he's wrong. I do not agree. And the interpretation of it, as you say, Terry, I think there are so many different interpretations. I don't think he meant what he actually said. The particular letter he wrote was because his friend had just died and he consoled the widow. And the fact that he said that has to be taken into account the context of what he was saying. I think if we look at it that way, I think that it might show what he was trying to say to console her. I think.
And
but go ahead. Sorry.
So I'll point out one further thing about Einstein, because this is something I looked at in gruesome detail based on his first papers, not just, I mean, digging through them in detail, figuring out what he actually said. If you take a modern computer science viewpoint on the exact same issue that Einstein came to the conclusion of the block universe about, you come to a very different conclusion. The conclusion is it's unnecessary. What he said is just flatly not needed. But there were no computers when he came up with that. The idea of virtual universes did not exist. The idea that you could have one universe that essentially could have all the other ones contained within it without contradiction simply was not a mathematical or conceptual concept at that time. But if you go through the details of his special relativity, I guarantee you, this is something, again, this is a paper I've been working on sometime I need to publish, but it's other people have done similar things. You do not need to do that. It's simply unnecessary. One universe can be going right through there, and it can contain all the information you need for all the different viewpoints, which is what drove him to say that, because some people had time that's slanted like this. Some had people time slanted like this. So he said, well, it must be all frozen, because otherwise, how's this guy going to see this time? This guy's going to see those time when they intersect. Well, at the first level, it looks like that, but actually it doesn't solve the problem. And there is more to Einstein's argument than Einstein had the tool set to work with at that time. So there's fascinating issues, but in the particular argument that he used for saying that everything was all determined for all time, it simply is not valid, because you can construct actual models that will run on a computer that show that you don't have to do that. And the fact that you can construct a proof to the contrary says that that was an unnecessary assumption. So it was a redundant assumption. That doesn't mean it's a wrong assumption, because it also turns out to be extremely difficult to prove one way or the other. The universe hides from us very well, remarkably well. But it is something that was an unnecessary addition. I'm sorry, I went into more depth than I'm into that, but it's fascinating.
No, that's great. Yeah, the constant search for hidden.
Bill, you wanted to
Mr.
say?
Daniel.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Bill,
I think, yeah, go ahead.
In my experience, it is what it is. It refers to a topic that's beyond reform, change, or correction. It's a rude statement that says, it's not worth talking about this anymore. It is what it is, and your assumptions that you can change it are bullshit. That's the sense that I get when I hear it used in a lot of discussions, especially from our president.
That was met with silence, wasn't it?
But yeah, going back over the sentence the statement that Einstein posited, let's just go over it again. The distinction between the past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. That is in of itself a profound statement.
Even though it's wrong.
I think he caught on to the shortcomings of our linguistic model, trying to extrapolate reality in a certain way, a dualistic way that was utility maximizing and the opposite, the antithesis of what coherence or scientific coherence is all about. So I think it was the beginning of him catching on to the shortcomings of certain linguistic models, and he just put it out there, camouflaged it, under the pretext of his friend dying or something like that. But the statement is in of itself a profound one.
I tend to agree that Ron, I have to disagree with you a little bit in this. I tend to agree that Einstein really did believe in the block universe. He really did think that the future and the past, like Bargy, I can't remember his name, Bargy, there are physicists who absolutely, a large part of physics right now is dedicated to figuring out how we have the, quote, illusion of time. And to most people,
right, Julian Barber,
like a very odd thing. And to physicists, it's a major, major issue. They say that since everything seems to be predetermined by our math, how do we have the illusion of now? And so you mentioned Einstein, but put it on steroids. At least half of the current physics community or more believes exactly that, to the point that it's hard for them to communicate with everyday people about this issue of the present moment.
Right. I think it's physics and linguistic. I don't think it's just the physics. I think it's linguistic. Noam
Yes,
Chomsky,
I would agree.
Noam Chomsky talks about this. He calls it psychic continuity.
And he says psychic continuity is nothing but an illusion. Julian Barber, right now he's espousing the idea
that's the one I was thinking of, yes.
Yes, timeless physics. And he talks about instances of reality, and how our mind basically, or our brain, generates this continuous stream. What did Newton call it? The universality of time, right? The ocean of time, never stopping. And how that is basically logically false and mathematically false. And right now they're developing the theories of force to support reality.
Let me suggest, just to point it in, just to throw it in here.
Sure.
The exactly contrary perspective, that certainty is what the universe is constantly building and creating, and that these illusions of everything being predetermined are actually the very things the universe is working towards, making things more predictable. That is the almost, you could say, the goal of physics, the way it works out, is to accumulate more information, more definition, so that things cease to be less.
Would you say it's to align things with our expectations?
I'm sorry, say it again.
Would you say the point of physics is to align things with our expectations? I mean, basically any vocation, I mean, from religion to science, every single discipline, is to align things with a certain kind of expectation model.
I would say that the malady of physics, that the persistent plague of physics, is to align it with our own desires and expectations. We've had 50 years of string theory that literally have produced zero predictions at enormous cost, based on ideas that are experimentally accessible. What is that all about? That wasn't what science was originally about.
Right.
So there's a pathology that exists within physics that tries to do exactly that. Nonetheless, if you look at the truly great innovators in physics, even if they did it incompletely, even if they did it poorly, even if they threw in assumptions that were not valid, the ones who made a real impact, the quantum theorists of the 1920s, they were trying to say, we haven't got it right, and there's something better we can do. And they did try to do this. So I think there's a good side of the science and physics where they're trying, with the same goal as philosophers, not to just rest in laurels and say, what's really going on here? And I think some of the best science is the philosophical science, where they don't just accept everything. They don't assume that all of this massive string theory nonsense is just something I reference and pretend it's real when there's no experimental implications, so.
Right. Do you think that one of the problems is a mechanistic view of the world that stems from a Galilean purview of the world versus?
And again, this is just me in this point. You're getting to the point where I would just say this, but I think this is the very illusion that we build up from a universe that starts with something that's a lot less certain, a lot less defined.
Right.
And because of that, we try to retroactively implant it back onto that reality. So we want every electron to be a separate electron, even though we know mathematically with incredible precision that's simply not true. As far as we know, there's only, you put two electrons in an atom, the mathematics require you to say, I don't know which one is which. If you don't do that, you can't figure out how chemistry works. That's remarkable. That's amazing.
Right.
Why does reality get so fragmented?
That's fascinating. I just have one more intrusion. Would you adequate the reality as mechanism with spirit? I mean, are we looking at the world from a spiritual viewpoint if everything is mechanistic and contradictory in that way?
That is a tough question, because I don't even know what mechanistic means. Some people don't believe in spiritual. I don't really believe mechanistic is a meaningful description of the reality that we have seen emerge, especially on the quantum side. That whatever is going on there is a heck of a lot weirder and a lot more involved with us even than we understand. So I would say that I can say, I'll leave back that statement. Some people say they don't believe in spiritual. I don't believe in the mechanistic. And this is just Terry now talking about my own approach. I have what I call the dark function approach to quantum mechanics, where I say that, no, it's not a billion different worlds inside of that quantum function. It's nothing. It's the absence of any information. We're adding the information to it. We're building on it. And we're creating from that emptiness.
Yeah, I mean,
So I have about as contrary a view from this predetermined block universe as you can get.
Can I bring can I bring things down to Earth again for a second?
Please do.
Is that okay with you? Because I think it might be what it is. I think that's what everybody's saying. But can we sort of get back to this? Because you know, I have to leave out half of what I wanted to say about it is what it is, because it might not be what it is. But about 10 minutes ago, half an hour ago, I said it has to be what it is, and now I'll say it never is what it is, because somebody mentioned relativity around about 2.5 hours ago, and I said I was going to come to it, and here I am. So
may I say something, Ron? Just one more thing.
Yes.
Are you familiar with Pessoa, the writer, who said fields are greener in their description than in their actual greenness? And I think our mission as philosophers is to clarify things, just to disambiguate things for the average person, so that we strive towards universal mental health. I think mental health is a huge issue that's in a certain way relevant to the topic of discussion. So it's all about clarifying ambiguities, using proper language. And I think Pessoa nailed it on the head when he said, fields are greener in their description than in their actual greenness. Without any kind of definition, there's a lot of ambiguity, and it's like lingering in limbo. It doesn't help anybody.
The problem here is that what you're alluding to or hinting to, that at some point you'll be able to get to something objective, and that we will never get to it. It's
why?
Because
we're back again.
Yes, because no, but it's
we're back again.
I mean, it's his fault. He started me off again.
It's kind of funny.
You can't say. I agree with the fact that at least my function is to clarify things for people who are not philosophers.
We clarify definitions. We clarify.
Okay, but I can only clarify up to a certain point, because there is no point that I can get to which I can say, well, this is the way it is. I've now clarified it. I know secretly that I can only get so far. I know that. And I can't fool people and say, this is the answer, because I know it isn't. And I know I don't have the answer, and I can't have the answer. Objectivity is something out there that we can never get to. It's untestable. And for me to say I'm going to try and clarify it, that is ridiculous, because I'm not. I can only.
I think that presupposes.
So can I bring up a counter example to this? Let's talk about the field of ethics, for example. Do I need a hypothesis test? Do I need to test whether or not murder is wrong? If that's true, everything is subjective. If everything is subjective, then the people who are saying that can say that murder is right. I mean, how do you have a system of ethics? Where's the system of ethics come from?
That's a very good question.
I think
that's another topic. But the point is, I can give you 5 reasons. I can show you 5 reasons why murder could be right. I mean, you cannot say murder's wrong if somebody comes up to your house is going to kill your family, and you say, no, I'm not going to kill them because
murder isn't self-defense. Murder is you just kill kill somebody.
You are.
That's
you see
the definition of murder.
But that's the point. Now you're putting all sorts of.
Sometimes we murder each other linguistically. I mean, we scapegoat each other all the time. It's not the physical act of murdering someone. We murder people by scapegoating them.
That's the point.
It's the same emotion.
But that's the point I'm making.
Is rape wrong? Is rape wrong, or is that a relative thing too?
Sometimes people rape each other linguistically. I mean.
Okay. Well, you can live in your linguistic world, but I'm talking about
it's all language,
real actions.
It's all
I'm talking
language.
about actions in the real world.
What do you think
I
drives
mean,
behavior?
you think things that are relative. I mean, you basically allow for the all sorts of
What do you
ridiculous
think
statements
drives
to be made.
behavior if not language? I don't
No.
understand. It's all linguistic.
You think everything is subjective. Why? If you think everything is subjective, then you can make those ridiculous statements. You can say that rape is right.
It cannot be anything else but subjective, because we're the ones who are actually making it, and we can only
I
be
think
subjective.
rape is objectively wrong.
When you say I think,
listen, when you want to talk objective, you have to get outside of the human bubble. You have to talk about universal moral claims that have nothing to do with people's emotions, their sensory apparatus and things like that. You have
It's not. It's not. It's apprehendable through human reason. The fact that we are able to
intertwined, though.
It's not. So how do you have a system of ethics? How do you even act? How do you even what tells you when you get up in the morning, hey, I shouldn't kill somebody?
Based on the tenets of logical coherence. That's what I'm trying to say. A universal objective view.
But you said that logic is why isn't your logic subjective?
Logic can be subjective, but what I'm saying is
logic is relative. Logic is subjective to you.
Logic can be subjective, it can be relative, and it can be absolute. But the way it's absolute is when you take it outside of the human apparatus, the human complex.
Bill,
the human state.
Bill wants to say something. Bill?
Behavior is a function of consequences. Behavior is a function of consequences delivered by a society when something occurs that the society doesn't approve of. If we have a consensus that something is wrong, then it's immoral. But the fact is, the culture defines the consequences that'll be punished and the consequences that'll be approved. And I don't know that we have to get more in depth than that.
That's language.
And it's consequences. I punish you by sending you to prison. That's not language.
That's the language of admonitory wisdom that our ancestors used all the time. If you read the book, Julian Jaynes, The Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, he talks about the gods of admonitory wisdom. It's all language. It's all symbols or icons or images in the form of a certain kind of language that admonishes people from doing certain kinds of things.
Convincing my client when he goes to jail that it's just a matter of language.
Yeah,
it's language
exactly.
that's sending
it's not
him
a matter of language.
It's all language.
It's not all language.
What is language? It's 100% symbolic. If language is 100%
language is
symbolic,
not. That's what our whole discussion has been about. Is that language has to be consistent with reality. It cannot.
It depends what kind of reality are you talking about, my friend. I mean, language is symbolic. If language is 100% symbolic, and we are 100% symbolic, then we are 100% language. That's common sense.
So I can define up as down in your world.
Of course, if you want to disorient a certain kind of individual who's
but
also...
they can't mean the same thing. They can't mean the same thing. Not everything is not.
Nothing means
saying there is symbolic language. There is symbolic language.
Everything is symbolic.
It has to be. It is constrained by reality. It can't represent itself.
So you're saying symbols are
contradictory to itself.
Wait, are you saying symbols are constrained by other symbols? Like symbols are constraining themselves?
The definitions, like the words that we use, logos, the words that we use are constrained by the fact that we can't say things that are contradictory to each other. I can define something as
what is
up.
Existence?
I can define something as up, and I can define something as down, but I can't define them as each other.
Of course, you can. So if you read the book Spiral Dynamics, people who are on the low spectrum can define up as down or down as up. They're highly mystical people. If you go up the spiral, you go to the integral
but you
field.
can't define them as each other. That's the point I'm trying to make. Like you can say, okay, this is up. This is an orientation for up. This is an orientation for down. But you can't say, well, up is down. I mean, you because that's.
Am I saying up
language
is down?
has constructed.
I didn't say up is down.
Well, yeah,
folks,
but you're saying things are subjective.
I
can define murderer. Yeah.
What?
Go ahead.
Do you know that Florida does not have an elected dog catcher, but it does have an elected mosquito catchers? Did you know that? It is what it is. Why? It is what it is. And not only Okay, are you with me now? Are you back to it is what it is? I'm just showing you. I'm just showing that it
That's
is
what
what
I
it
was
is.
saying. It's not everything is a tautology.
Exactly.
Not everything is simply a matter of definition. And if everything is simply a matter of definition, I can define a definition as not being a definition. I mean, it does. I mean,
yes, but that won't be a successful definition.
Up as down.
That won't be. Listen, you have the liberty to define things as you see fit, but the relative success of such definition will be susceptible to where you stand in space-time and in society.
In conclusion, I would like to say that if it is what it is, there would be no urge for progress, no urge for new inventions, no urge to do anything. There would be Elon Musk would not have been doing his underground transportation for Los Angeles or electric cars or space travel because it is what it is. And Roger Penrose would not have envisaged and proved the existence of black holes, the work on which firmed up evidence for the Big Bang, because it is what it is. Einstein would have accepted that the clocks were different times in different towns in Switzerland because it is what it is. And there would be, and Copernicus and Kepler and Galileo, it is what it is. There's the sun, it's going around, it is what it is. It is what it is, it's a sin. It's a disgrace. It shouldn't be allowed.
Right. But Ron, I just have to counter.
There would be no Black Lives Matter or any political movement or movement for change because it is what it is. You would not have an election in 2 days if it is what it is, because half the country would say it is what it is, and that's the way it should be. Okay, countries that broke away from colonial rule, including the USA, did not say it is what it is.
Right. I mean, isn't that all?
So does disagreement mean that we can't perceive an objective truth? Does disagreement preclude objective truth?
Yes.
Does perception so a lunatic in an insane asylum can say, I perceive this, and we can't say, hey, you're a lunatic, and put him in this insane asylum?
I cannot tell somebody that if he sees he sees God in the sky, I cannot say to him, you are wrong, you are not seeing what you're saying you're seeing. I'm sorry.
Every idea.
I cannot do that, and I won't do it. If he says he sees it, I'll say, I don't think you are, but I'm not saying to him, you're an idiot, because God doesn't exist. I think he doesn't exist.
If somebody shoots up a school, and is a raging lunatic, I'm not going to tell them it's their perception.
Every idea is real. Whether or not it's logically valid is a different story. I mean, all this talk just points to the heightened levels of linguistic complexity that has been going on for aeons, for thousands of years. And that's one of the questions I want to ask you, Ron. I mean, you talk about it is what it is, and if it wasn't, then we wouldn't have all this technological advancement. But does that make sense? Granted, there are so many descriptions of mental illnesses that are filling the DSM books and in all the psychology departments and things like that. I mean, mental health has never been as big of an issue right now, the 21st century, in relation to how life was thousands of years ago, where people didn't suffer from. And right now, if you scratch your nose a certain way, you're diagnosed with a mental disorder. Jesus Christ. What is that all?
How can you even define something as a mental disorder if you say it's all subjective?
If somebody
it's subjective to the Church of Psychology. I mean, that's the whole thing. The objectifying people and putting everything into
psychology objective.
If somebody
it objectifies people.
If somebody from outside came now and heard us talk, he'd say there's a bunch of insane people. What the hell are they talking about? They're mad. What are they talking about? They're all insane. And what would you say? No, we're not. We are normal. We're talking about normal things. And for you, it's the morning. For me, it's night. And we're all talking about normal things. He'd say we're insane.
We have human reason. We have human reason. Just because somebody says X is so, and then somebody comes along and disagrees and says Y is so, doesn't mean that human beings have to throw up their hands and say, I don't know. I I mean, that's ridiculous. There, we
think,
have,
I think
you know,
that
there
we
is,
need,
the mind can perceive objective, objective reality. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to observe it.
I do.
Can you give us an example of an objective reality? I don't know what the name of the
we were
person who's
talking about ethics. You have no, your worldview
ethics
has no, there's no ethical. Okay, if ethics are not objective,
well, of course
then
not. You're gonna
how do you feel about rape?
You're going to go to some jungle village and tell them that your ethics are wrong? Is that what you're going to do?
Yeah, because I think it's. What do you think?
Fair enough. Fair enough.
You think cannibalism? You think cannibalism?
No,
you
I don't.
Cannibalistic. Okay, 1 second. So the language we use is an offshoot of all the things you're referencing right now. Sometimes we murder each other linguistically. We scapegoat each other all the time. Gossiping. What do you think?
I'm talking
about
actions.
What do you think?
We're talking
what's
about
the
actions
difference?
in the real
world.
What's
the difference? The same areas in the brain light up when a predator catches its prey. Let's say, a tiger runs and it catches a monkey or something. The same areas in that tiger's brain lights up as a scientist who just found the solution to his or her algorithm. The same area, it's called the hunting ecstasy. So all these are primal sensations that have been rationalized and justified using linguistic models, modern linguistic models, to make sense of the world and to try to stave off, heightened levels of violence. But it's the same primal emotion that we metaphorically.
Yeah. So when a guy walks into the court and said, "Hey, I raped somebody," it was my instinct. It was my chimpanzee instinct that caused me to do that. You think the judge should say, "Oh yeah, those were the linguistic firings in your brain."
I'm not rationalizing the behavior, but I'm giving you a correlation. I'm not rationalizing that behavior.
You have no system for ethics. If you can't rationalize whether it's right or wrong, then you have no ethical system.
I'm giving you points of correlation. I'm giving you points of correlation from a scientific point of view behind that basically sheds the same light on a person doing said kind of action, and the linguistic model that riddles the corporate offices where people gossip and talk about people behind their back. And there's an increased level of psychopathology, psychopaths in the corporate structures based on this kind of linguistic model that I'm referencing. So actually standing on the corner and doing something, or using language to kind of get the same kind of emotional satisfaction that a person would get doing a certain kind of action, there's a very high correlation there. That's scientifically proven. Evolutionary biology points its finger towards that kind of behavioral model. So there's a lot of correlation here. Now, whether or not that's true or not true, I mean, that's what logic is all about.
I'm now going to
validity.
Hello, folks. This has been amazing. I'm now going to finish off with a sentence. Aristotle's well-known definition of truth. Okay, so everybody's happy because Aristotle is Aristotle. You're not going to argue with him, are you? So he says, to say what is that is not. No, sorry. To say of what is that it is not, or of what is not that it is false. While to say of what is that is, and of what is not that is not, is true. In other words, it is what it is. And with that, I thank you very much for coming along. It was extremely interesting. And I didn't say half of what I wanted to say, because it is what it is. And what can you do about it? And I look forward to seeing you next month, where we're doing again something very light and airy-fairy, with no thought, and just having a little chat like we did this evening. And I hope that you'll all come again next month. So thank you very much. And it was great seeing you.
Thank you, Ron. Good session.
And thank you for all your input, which is great. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.